Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Silicon Valley After Show here on AFTERBUZZ TV, and today we're playing Uncle Jerry's game, so stay tuned.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Silicon Valley After Show here on AFTERBUZZ TV. We're a little early today. We did a little bit of rescheduling, so any of you who are surprised by our premiere time, we always go on Mondays, so hopefully it didn't surprise you too much. But I'm Jeff Graham, guys. If you guys want to find me online, you can do so at Jeffrey C. Graham. I'm so excited to talk about the penultimate episode of Season 4 of this amazing show. But before we do that, I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves. My co-panelists.
I'm Christian Bladt. You can find me on the Twitter and the Instagram at ChristianDMZ.
And I'm Phil Svitek. Thank you guys for joining. I love the double play of Hooli-Con.
I know. I thought of that too.
It's what a great episode.
I
Absolutely
so
fantastic.
agree. Speaking of that, let's talk about our overall reactions to this episode. Maybe some of the reasons. To me, the last two episodes are consistently the best in any Silicon Valley season, and this episode did not disappoint for me. What did you guys think?
Well, I think that it definitely did not disappoint, and the whole time I was thinking about how you were a little underwhelmed by last week's episode, and I was like, I bet that Jeff's going to like this one. And not only because Jared almost blows up, but we get to see some real emotion from him, but I thought that it was interesting how Hoover played an integral part. Is that word an integral or integral? Anyway, that
Integral.
word, yeah, that word part of the episode, because it's so clear how much he still loves Gavin.
I know.
And also, like, you know, Jack basically told him, get the fuck away from me. And he's like, okay. So, I don't know. I think that it was nice to see that Hoover's an ally. That was something I was not expecting.
Agreed.
I've been reading a lot of comparison to sort of Breaking Bad, where Richard is kind of like the Breaking Bad character. He goes from good to bad, in some sense, and I could kind of see the comparison. I think it's a little far stretched, but so be it. The other thing that I'm happy to see is that Jack Barker understands that he bought a piece of shit VR.
Yeah.
It didn't take him long to realize, yeah.
Yeah, $2 billion spent on just a demo, and that's all he needs. And you know, as a side kind of thing to not just the tech industry, but just industries at large. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people just cater to their stock prices, and
Right.
will just do that as opposed to having real substance. And so I like that they brought that up. And so much what happened in this episode, I thought it was perfect.
Yeah, I agree. A couple things I sort of thought of when I was thinking back as to my opinions in this episode, and one of them you alluded to, Christian, was Hoover's importance in the story. One thing this season I think in general has done really well is incorporate side characters in really like meaningful ways. Really, we've only gotten like two brand new characters introduced to my knowledge, and that's Mia, that's true. I guess, but she's been called back. So she'd be one, and then the Blood Boy is another one.
Oh, yeah.
But to me, the Blood Boy is really the only like guest star who's only been used for a joke. I guess also that patent lawyer. But for the most part, what I've liked, I guess I keep deflating my own point, but the thing I've liked about this season is like characters like Hoover and Russ Henneman and Mia. And, even Winnie was back this episode, have like weaved in and out in ways that I think are really meaningful. And rather than introduce new characters, they'll kind of call back and use their guest stars effectively, which I think is really impressive. The other thing I really liked about this episode, which Phil kind of alluded to, was it was kind of dark. Like, I feel like we're getting kind of shades of character. Like, this Jack Hoover interaction was kind of dark to me. I feel like Richard's pettiness is kind of getting a little like Walter White-esque because it's really impeding his ability to do his job.
Yeah, but at least like Walter, not to get too far on the subject of Breaking Bad, Walter White, his goal was never out of pettiness.
Right.
Yeah, where like certainly he wouldn't be arguing over space versus tabs and then creating poop jokes.
Yeah.
Poop fair.
Poop fair. Well, that was the most amazing thing because it's absolutely true. They were in the process of not just getting away with it, but being very successful. But he had to go and change this guy's screensaver.
Yeah. And
he really is, you know, Bachman was eerily accurate that he and Richard are just destined to really just kind of screw everything up.
Yeah, this was like kind of an angsty episode in a really good way, I thought, but also very, very funny. I feel like this episode was very like tonally specific in a way that I thought was awesome. And yeah, we're seeing that like Richard kind of has an Achilles heel, and like I feel like next season could choose to take that either way, but he'll either have to learn and grow, or I think he'll spiral further into ineptitude, because like this kind of felt like a pretty significant episode to me for that reason. I guess let's start by talking about the plan. The plan was introduced to us last episode. The reason I bring this up is because, Phil, you know about more tech than I do, but is this something
Do I know about pineapples?
The pineapple thing, is this like... I'm sure this is borrowing from something that could actually work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know to that level. No, I've never hacked a convention. I've been to plenty of conventions, but
That he's willing to say on camera.
Right,
Yeah,
yes.
let's be clear.
And yet is what you mean. You never hacked a convention yet.
correct. I don't even know, because I don't quite understand the tech. Like, I love tech, but this is still beyond me in terms of what they're trying to achieve, just with the cell phones and the internet and so forth. So, I mean, essentially, it's like a backdoor Trojan. Like, log on to the Hooli Wi-Fi, but instead of logging onto that, you get the app
Right.
and the internet.
The thing that I liked that they addressed, which is so true, is that people never delete their apps. I feel like sometimes the tech references in this show are a little above my head, but that was one where I was like, that is so true. Do you guys feel that way?
Definitely. I still have the contraction tracker for when my wife had our son 2 years ago.
Nice.
It's still there, but we got a great joke in that moment, which of course was Guilfoyle looking through his phone. McCain Palin, 2008.
I know.
Which was great.
That was an interesting... Do you think that was downloaded out of irony or out of earnestness?
Well, that's the thing about Guilfoyle. You'll never know.
Right.
But my guess, earnestness.
I kind of think so, too.
Yeah.
He kind of reminds me of one of those, like, alt-right.
It's not even that. I think just that, everybody that he knew was probably so pro-Obama.
Right.
And he was like, no, I'm going the other way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Were you going to say something, Phil? I didn't mean to interrupt.
Jared had nip alert still on his phone.
That was actually pretty great. Yeah, I forgot about that.
I guess since you brought up Jared, I feel like in our after show he usually adopts his own segment just because it's been such a fantastic Zach Woods season. But let's go ahead and talk about Jared, because speaking of darkness, I feel like shades of the breakdown that we've been predicting all season were revealed in this episode. We learned about Uncle Jerry's game.
Well, we still don't quite know what Uncle Jerry's game is to the full extent, apart from the fact that just make believe that everything's good.
And also, if Jared does his job correctly, we will never know, because I don't think that most of us are equipped to handle Uncle Jerry's game. But it also starts from him very early in the episode talking about as a product of forced adoption, which was such a great deadpan line that he delivered and just went right past it.
Yeah, I can tell you there will be consequences. Yeah. He ended up saying.
And there were, technically. I mean, what's kind of interesting, and this is more in the predictions realm, but where it kind of goes, I mean, even though we want to explore Jared more and his psyche in that respect, the fact that these glasses are blowing up, he's going to have to create a step back from his own emotions, because they've got a far bigger issue. Mm-hmm. But he was right. Consequences,
right,
definitely were happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited to talk about that final scene, because obviously it played into the narrative in a very important way, but I think it also probably played into some tech issues that happened over the last 2 years in a very satirical way. But we'll save it just because that feels like the climactic scene. So we get to Hooli-Con. I think some of the Hooli-Con specifics that we wanted to see. Last week we talked about, Phil, how we were excited for this specific convention trope because it's just fun to see how the writers handle the specifics of the convention. So I think we got to see some great Action Jack Barker stuff. Obviously that interaction between him and Hoover was kind of intense. Did that take you guys by surprise with the way he kind of dealt with Hoover?
I think the way that we're seeing Jack Barker get built up at this point, it's not surprising, because he's so blinded by his goal of putting on a great presentation. Mm-hmm. He even said it. He doesn't care that the VR is shit.
Right.
He just wants that moment to be great because Gavin had such a great moment. And he's just like, Hoover, you're distracting me. This is like a great moment. There's no way that what you're saying is important, which obviously is the way that middle management, who is lucky enough to succeed all the way to the top, kind of looks at the world,
Right.
So.
I do love the fact that the stage was the triangular growth
Oh, it was the conjoined triangles
you know
of
what?
success.
I didn't even catch that.
I didn't catch that
That's so
either.
funny. So funny that I didn't even get it. But that's great. I'm glad you pointed it out.
Yeah, it was the few times they had the
Yeah.
more wider overhead type
missed it.
shots.
No, now that
too.
you say it, I can visualize it. That was great.
The conjoined triangles of success. Is that what they call that?
Yeah.
Oh, so one of my favorites. So obviously this is what causes Hoover to turn and kind of support the guys in their plan. There was some great visual gags in the way this pineapple plan was executed. I think HBO took kind of a risky joke with this Dinesh
Dinesh
moment.
with the backpack?
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, Jared, takes it off and he says, like, all right, so you push the button and kill it. And then he was like,
But so funny. I mean, like, I do wonder if HBO is going to get a couple letters, like, regarding that joke. But man, I loved it.
I'm sure I'm sure. I don't know. There's certain comedy you're well aware of what you're doing, and you know that it's pushing that figurative button. But here's the, I don't know. I'm of the mindset that comedy needs to be able to go any which way. Otherwise, like, you're making fun of something and you're drawing attention to it. So, it less speaks about the show, but more about us as a culture and everything of that nature, right? That's what comedy is, and that's what, in a way, this is very satirical, and that's what satire does, is it points a spotlight back at actual society more so than itself.
Absolutely, yeah. The show, I mean, that the show is one step ahead of the audience. Their approach to joke writing, even when it maybe teeters a line between offensive and funny, is always pointed, and I think has a very specific point of view that justifies its inclusion, for sure. So I agree with you,
Yeah, I
Phil.
mean, they needed to address the fact that someone who looks like Dinesh is going to be walking around a convention with a backpack, and there's going to be something shady going. So I think it would have been disingenuous if they ignored.
Oh, I totally
Yeah.
agree. And it was handled in such a funny way. What's interesting, though, is, of course, we've touched on it already, but the execution of this plan is undermined by the fact that Richard can't help but be petty here. First of all, I want to shout out, is it Falula Borg? I think that's the name of this actor. I've been a fan of his for a long time. I'm saying I think that's his name, so maybe I'm not
So
as
you're
big
not a huge fan, but you're a moderate fan. Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it exactly correctly, but he is, of course, in Pitch Perfect 2 and kind of accrued his fame through YouTube. So I think the inclusion of him in this episode is really interesting. And I'm just a fan of his, so I thought he turned in a nice performance here. But let's talk about this app that their team, that Winnie and Joel, have developed. Peace Fair. It's an app where people can, rather than fight in a kind of MMORPG type of game, they can make the world better and plant agricultural crops and, be altruistic with each other online. What did you guys think of this joke specifically in the show?
I mean, it's a great joke, especially because it had moments like Jared said, I just gave a calculator to an orphan. You have a lot of individual jokes that you can get. I mean, it seems like the sort of thing that someone would try and make, and you know what, it might even be made well, but of course no one's going to actually play it.
Right.
So I thought that it was actually pretty funny, and Richard just got so mad about it. It's like, wait, it's a game? Because and both Dinesh and Guilfoyle were like, well, yeah, that seems a lot easier than trying to actually bring about real peace.
Yeah, I feel like this was like kind of touching on like the collectivism generation, where like rather than actually go to Rwanda, you post an article about Rwanda on your Facebook and feel like you've kind of accomplished.
Better yet, you comment.
Or you comment.
Yeah,
So sad.
Yeah.
So sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, you share an article instead of, I don't know, going to actually vote, just
Right.
an idea. Just pick that out of nowhere, just something I'm thinking about.
Everyone should vote.
Yeah, everyone should vote.
like-
I mean, not me, but everybody else, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't need to vote because on Facebook I told other people to.
Exactly. And I feel like the mechanics of this game like kind of really subtly touched on that mentality, which I thought was really sharp. But yeah, we talked about this at the beginning, but Richard's pettiness couldn't allow himself to let this exist. So he changes the screensaver of their booth from saying Peace Fair to saying Poop Fair.
What I love is the comparison between Gavin and Richard, and in that sense, whether you look at Jack Barker or you look at Gavin, at least like they have obviously high levels of ego, but I don't know, it gets dicey because at least their ego is very much in the tech space,
Right.
versus he's very much bruised over any girl. A girl that he knew that he didn't like because of tabs and spaces.
Right.
And as they mentioned, he threw himself down the stairs intentionally so that he didn't have to be around her. Yeah, and he gets so upset. And it was so funny because it shows how awkward he is around people. And the moment when he's talking to her and he's like, awkward. And she's like, how? Because like a normal person would be like, what's so awkward about that? You didn't like me.
Yeah, this was a really good Richard episode, and I kind of feel in general that Thomas Middleditch has had a really good season. Specifically, like I feel like his physical comedy, we've seen so much more from him. Just a lot of him like ending scenes, tripping over things that aren't there, or like
And don't forget what happened to that door.
the door. Yeah, one of the biggest victims of this season.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll see it, unfortunately, but I would love for him to sneak an Emmy nom this season because I feel like he's turned in a really consistently strong performance, and I know he's gotten some Critics' Choice attention, but I really feel like he's given us like very a lot of choices. I feel like he's made deliberate choices this season that have really elevated his performance. So I'd say that's true of this episode too, and I can't wait to see what he does in the finale. Of course, the decision to change the screensaver to Poop Fair. My favorite thing about this was, of course, it was petty, but the group is not only mad for what he did, but mad that it was such a poorly executed joke. They offered some alternative suggestions to Poop Fair: Poop Fart, Peace Fart, Penis Fair. Which
They
would have
didn't
been
take it to Penis Fart. But
Penis
I thought that would have probably been the best one.
that probably would have been the best one. But Jared was very upset with this decision. I think
Look me in the eye.
yeah. I think "you reckless child" were the words.
I mean, think about Jared has every right to be upset where he knowingly played Uncle Jerry's game, gave him the trust, and yeah, I mean, in some sense, Dinesh and Guilfoyle are just so inept in terms of that world, and they just don't care ultimately. Like, they say they do, but they don't. That, I mean, you have to look at it from... I mean, think about if you've given up everything, and you live in a server room where you're forced to have Gavin Belson's face staring at you, and yet you're still okay with it, and you're like, over this was the decision that you had to just do. Because part of me thought, okay, he's gonna help rewrite the code and he's gonna do something, but yeah, I agree with Jared. Poop Fair, really? So help any of you if you sacrifice AfterBuzz for Poop Fair.
For Poop Fair. Fair enough. Well, obviously, this is what leads to the investigation and puts the company in jeopardy. And I need your guys' help here. The final demonstration obviously doesn't go as well as had initially been anticipated because the actual hardware is unable to handle the VR. Mm-hmm. But we don't know for sure if the hardware is malfunctioning because of the VR or because of the Pied Piper internet integration, right?
We don't know that for sure.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
I think that it probably wasn't, but they're going to spend most of the next episode thinking it did do it, because they seem to be very intense. Jared, I just called you Jared. Jeff doesn't like to see the next week's scenes, but we know that they're all pretty intense and very focused in that episode.
Also, Christian, it's not Jared, it's Donald.
Sorry, Donald. I
Come
apologize.
on. Yeah, obviously, I mean, they never say it outright, but I'm sure that this sequence is a reference to the exploding Samsung Galaxy 7s. I loved this. I thought it was hilarious, and I'm so glad the show didn't turn its head to that. It's like when the show can address actual developments in the world of tech in such a well-included, funny way. I just love it so much. So this was so funny to me.
Well, it just also goes to show that while they can't have their own success, their success is only being able to bring down other companies.
Yeah.
And so forth. And in that regard, yeah, it remains to be... Here's the thing, just by mixing the three together, because you had Hooli apps and the VR, and now this, you don't know. But it's untested, and so who knows? But I did love Jack Barker. Until such notice, Jack Barker thinks he is responsible for this.
Yeah. Which he might be solely responsible. We don't necessarily know yet, so I'll be really interested to see.
To be fair, he is, because he didn't want... Like, Hoover warned him of a potential danger.
Yeah.
And he specifically declined to be told that danger.
That's true. His ego stepped in the way of potentially preventing it from happening in the first place. Whatever the software was that debunked the entire room.
Yeah, Jack Barker's ego, if it hadn't gotten in the way, would have caught the Silicon Valley gang, the Pied Piper trio, basically. Or if Richard's ego of needing to put the screensaver, the poop fair up there, if that hadn't gotten in the way, they would have also gotten away with it. So, it's very interesting, actually, that as you were talking, I started to think like, hey, that's actually very layered storytelling.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of the same, it's kind of the same Achilles heel that affected every single misstep in this episode.
It's interesting because now that I think more about it, Richard is often compared to Gavin Belson. And if he's not careful, he could end up like Jack Barker.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting to see Jack. Obviously, he's taken over Gavin's shoes, and he is kind of like another version of Gavin, too. I thought that was really interesting to see Jack kind of catch the ego bug and treat Hoover in such a shitty way. Am I missing anything?
Well, one thing we have to go back to is Mia showed up again.
Of course, yeah. I briefly mentioned it, but we haven't.
It was very important, the conversation that Dinesh has with her.
Yeah.
And, if she finds, she's going to get online and she's going to find out who ratted her out to the FBI and she's going to destroy them. And so then she tells him her plan, and he says, what's your policy on anonymous tips? And I thought it was great because I continue to think his uppance will come, as the great Sideshow Bob said.
Yeah.
I think that he keeps messing with this girl, and my theory, this is not a prediction because it's not time for predictions, I think she knows it was him. And she was sort of giving him that little kernel of information, because then when she gets caught, she's like, yep, it's definitely him.
Yeah, she can torture him.
How's Pakistan? It's like, well, I'm going to just stay married to this idea and act like it's totally legit.
What about Guilfoyle saying it's so simple, she's so smart, no wonder she's in jail?
Yeah, I thought that was a nice touch, yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm so impressed with the way this show has managed to use seemingly side characters in really meaningful ways. I think it's it is, for such a heavily plotted comedy, they do a good job of making meaningful choices with their side characters. So we definitely haven't seen the last of Mia, and I'm excited for her to do something crazy, I think.
I'm sure Dinesh is not excited for whatever it is.
I guess we did forget to talk about Erlich. Of course, Erlich and Jin Yang have some more fun interplay in this episode. Erlich ends up winding up in Tibet and finding Gavin. What did you guys think about this?
Well, it starts with how he got there, which is, one, he reads a postcard that was to Richard, and it says Richard Hendricks and Company.
Yeah. And
then also he's like, well, if you gents, we could pass the hat, and Jin Yang's like, I'll pay for you. Like instantly, and then he's like, and somebody said, won't you need a visa? And he's like, well, I have an uncle in Beijing, he's very corrupt. Which is great. All great. Every line that he had in this episode was great.
Yeah.
Because when Bachman's like, well, you leave 3 hours early for international, 4 hour, new rule. And he's like trying to drag the suitcase. So everything that he did in the episode was so funny, and he barely did anything.
Yeah, he wasn't used very much in this episode, and
I wanted him to see they played a little bit with it, but especially initially when he picks up the heavy bag, I wanted him to struggle with it a little bit. But I just loved, you could tell exactly his motive behind everything of just get the hell out of here.
Right, definitely.
Nobody wants you.
Well, I don't think we've seen the last of Gavin or Erlich, and I'm excited to see how that all plays out. But is there anything else specifically before we get into predictions?
Well, it was interesting, Gavin's reaction to seeing Bachman, because I think he's the last person that he wanted to see in Tibet.
Absolutely. I like how they even had the touch of having Gavin had shaved his head. Yeah. It's very monk-esque. And yeah, I had a feeling it was some kind of, like, I would have predicted Asia as the destination for Gavin Belson, so I was not surprised to see that he wound up there. And I got shades of Doctor Strange with this.
Yes.
A little bit. I was thinking we might see Tilda Swinton, but alas, we did not.
Maybe next week.
Maybe next week. I guess with that, we've covered mostly everything in this episode. Let's go ahead and get into some predictions.
And now, your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
What's our policy on anonymous predictions?
Let's do it.
No, I'm looking forward to it. From the preview, everything looks jam-packed to me. Unlike most episodes, it looks kinetic.
Yeah.
Right? Where this episode, in some sense, like it's the Silicon Valley version of Ocean's 11. And I think next week is going to kind of be somewhere along the lines, because at the end of the day, there's still potentially the footage. I mean, I'm curious to see Hoover's extent that he's willing to wipe the slate clean for them versus just kind of not having been in the way.
Right.
And I don't know if it ends on a good note or bad note. That's my biggest question.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I expect that Gavin is going to come back mostly because he doesn't want to hang out with Erlich, and he ends up coming back.
Erlich!
Yeah, and he just goes back and he takes back his company because of the actions that Jack Barker did. I think it'll be pretty easy for him to come back, and and then they can leave Bachman in Tibet if they want to now, because we know he's not coming back next year. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But I think that out of sheer irritation, Gavin's going to come back, and I don't know how that's going to impact our friends at Pied Piper, but I think he's going to save Hooli.
Yeah, I agree that because now Pied Piper and Jack Barker are going to be at odds, Gavin can be the logical savior for Pied Piper again. It's a good question of whether or not the guys are going to end up on a good note or a bad note, because as with this show and most shows, the season finale will either kind of put the heroes of the show on a mountaintop or in a valley. So
I love that prediction, because I think he does. Remember, before Gavin got fired, Jack Barker was like, I could say all these things, but I'm not going to.
Right.
And so I think, borrowing from seasons ago where Gavin came in and he's like, I was playing possum the entire time. So you wasted billions of dollars in acquisitions? Yes. Yes, I did. And so I think he'll come back with some sort of remarks along those lines of like, I did that so to prove to you that Jack Barker is an incompetent CEO.
wow.
And then, Pied Piper is like, we're effed.
Yeah, and like it's going to be interesting to see like if/how Bream Hall like processes all of this. We probably won't see them next episode, but
I guess it'll depend on how it goes.
Yeah.
If they're able to prove that it works, then we might see at least Monica briefly. But
Right.
yeah, it's hard to predict actually.
Yeah.
Though this is the predictions.
It feels like there's enough brewing that I'd love to see like an experiment in an hour-long episode with this show. It might kind of deflate the pacing, but I'd be curious. With HBO, they're not necessarily limited to as explicit runtimes as you would be on network.
I mean,
so.
this episode was 1 minute longer than the others, just because I saw, in the menu, and I'm like, so, maybe you're right. Go with 10 more, 15 more, see what happens.
We'll see. Either way, I'm really looking forward to next week. Oh, another thing we mentioned at the top that has been a little disappointing about this season is it feels like Bighead just got his little arc teaching at Stanford. I kind of doubt we'll see him next week.
I hope we get him for just a second, because I wanted to prove my theory from many predictions ago on this very show that he's crushing it as a teacher. He's a great
You mean with the
educator.
ladies? I was going to say the P word, but with the ladies,
No,
just...
not with the ladies.
You were going to say poop on air? Poop fair?
No, we could have pussy talk.
See, I was going to say, even Pussy Fair would have been a better one. Come on!
We can talk about sports, their scores, pussy, anything we want. It would be funny, maybe just we see like Bighead on a class field trip with his Stanford students
That's
at
true.
Hooli-Con. I don't know.
Holding the flag so they all know where to go. Yeah, like their children.
Well, I guess we'll just have to tune in and see next Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific on HBO. But in the meantime, guys, this has been the Silicon Valley After Show. We're all eagerly anticipating the finale, and we hope you'll tune in for our coverage. I'm going to keep reaching out to guests. Maybe we can get someone in studio. Phil mentioned Stephen.
Throw out some tweets.
Phil mentioned Stephen Tobolowsky, who I actually haven't reached out to yet, and I have a week, so...
Action Jack.
Action Jack. That'd be really...
Action Jeff.
Action Jeff getting Action Jack. I can't even talk. If you guys want to tweet at Stephen Tobolowsky and let him know that the after show would love to have him on, we can get an army of tweets and maybe that'll help.
Or you could do it yourself.
Or I'll do it myself. Fine. In the meantime, guys, speaking of Twitter, if you want to find me there, you're able to at Jeffrey C. Graham. And on Fridays, I always plug it, but I host a show called The Unproduced Table Read. We're reading a kind of fun, teen-driven half-hour comedy this Friday. And Josh Brener actually might be joining us for it. So
Big head?
Big head, speaking of. So that'll be Friday at 10 a.m. on our sister network, The Popcorn Talk. For the rest of you guys, where can they find you on the internets?
I'm at Christian DMZ, and on Tuesdays here at AfterBuzz, I do the Trump Report at 7 p.m. Pacific. So come check it out.
And follow us here at AfterBuzz TV or check out my website, philsvitek.com. And this was a fun and spirited round of Uncle Jerry's game.
All right, guys. See you next week. Bye.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.